for the 21-22 budget development cycle. Again, in attendance is our Board of Education, myself, Superintendent, Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Jeff Lamoureux, and our Board Clerk, Michelle Andrews. Also note, as we've said over the last couple meetings, if you have questions or you want additional information, these are the, you can click on the website or the dedicated Board of Education email, or call me. Again, tonight is draft 3. A couple important dates coming up. On the 19th, which is a Monday, so our normal Board of Education meetings are on Thursday. This one will be on a Monday. So April 19th is a Monday. We will be adopting our budget. And then May 18th is our budget vote. I want to welcome Cynthia Womble from Central Business Office. Good evening, Cynthia.
Good evening.
And I will move through these quickly. I keep these on here for consistency, but again, each meeting we talk about our guiding principles. These have not changed. The process we're using, so for our public, this is a workshop for the board. If there are questions related to the budget workshop, you may ask them during the regular meeting under public comment. So draft number 3, and it's a little small, so I apologize. We try to fit it all on there, but what you'll know, I hope that's most significant, is at the very bottom, we have been able to shave that initial deficit from around $440,000 down to $17,000 as of today, and that's a result of some expenditures coming in less than we were projecting or were planning. And also, we have a couple contracts that have been negotiated and have been built in. So we'll talk more about that. But the good news is we are nearing that balance of 0, where we want to be. We will do some revenue analysis, and then Cynthia has presented, put together, and will present 3 slides based on the newest, latest information we have regarding federal government and state. So we want to stop here. We're going to spend some time on this, and I will wait and move to Cynthia when it's her time to review these. But we have one big significant item that's hanging out right now. So the federal stimulus money, we have a pretty comfortable idea of what that's slated to be, that $2.4 million in green. But what's not been determined yet is the state, in the initial executive proposal, had a local district funding adjustment of the same amount, which was a negative, which would make that obviously a 0 impact. Both the Senate and the Assembly budget versions were supposed to remove that, or at least that's what they had proposed doing. So right now, we still have a major question mark regarding what's going to happen with that. And we'll talk about that a little later. Tax levy and appropriated fund balance and reserves has not changed at this point. Again, as we said last meeting, any additional revenue that comes in above what we anticipated, we would like to reduce our use of that reserve, or reduce of reserves potentially, so that we're not utilizing them until later in the next couple of years if needed. Same thing, this line has not changed, so this is no change from the previous budget workshop. Now, school aid, and this again, as we had stated earlier, there's still that local district funding adjustment that has been proposed, even though we believe it should be legislated out and it won't occur. It's not 100% yet. And so, as we talk later on, that's really the biggest question mark remaining for us. Reserve use, again, just to show you where we are, what we're using, and we've talked about this. We're willing to use and able to use around a third. And again, we have reserves for a reason, but if we can hold on to that money for future use, that's our goal. So what is new? And I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia with Central Business Office. Cynthia?
All right. Well, we're all anxiously awaiting for the state to finalize the budget, and really until they do, it's very nebulous as to what's going to actually happen. The aid that was provided under the executive proposal and then in the one House bills is very different, more so than I've ever seen when in my tenure working with school districts. We could receive additional aid of say $432,000, and that's really That's just an increase in the expenditure-driven aids from what I had provided at the time of the executive proposal. But then we could also receive millions more. And even this $3.3 million figure, it's really an unknown number. It could be higher. This includes that additional expenditure-driven aid plus the restoration of that $2.4 million cut Mr. Van Fossen was referring to earlier, the local funding adjustment, and then a potential increase in foundation aid. And that increase in foundation aid has both been proposed by both houses. And that's the part that is really up in the air, exactly how much you would be eligible to receive, how much the state is going to put forth to support education funding, and how will that be funded? You know, where's that revenue going to come from the state? So we're unfortunately not going to know until we know. And it's very hard to pick a number somewhere in between there until the state determines whether they're going to supplant or supplement the federal aid as well. And you can see on the next slide that the district and all districts will be receiving 3 rounds of federal stimulus funds. The CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, which was the one that was received first and is helping, could help this year as well. The Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations, which is the one that was acted on in December. And so that is the one that is included in the executive proposal. And then the newest is the American Rescue Plan. And all of these total together, if you go to the next slide, could total approximately $5.5 million. Now, this wouldn't be used all in one year. This would be used potentially over a period of this year, although we're choosing to defer it for this year. Then it could be used in 2021, 22, 22, 23, and then the summer of 23. So the state has not provided the official allocations. We've had some reports on the estimated allocations for round 3, but we haven't received the official allocations from the state yet. Approximately $349,000 of this must be used by September of 2022, and then the rest by September of 2023. So we have some time to use this, and we don't want to use it all at once. We want to try to make this work for the district as long as possible. The allowable use of the funds is not known yet either. So there could potentially be restrictions on these funds and how they're used, especially round 3, that is not yet available to districts. We do know from the limited documentation that we have that 20% of round 3 would need to be used for learning loss. The definition of learning loss has not yet been defined either. This would be approximately $819,000. Ideally, these funds, again, would be used in such a way that we could spread the benefit of them for as long as possible. So once we know the state budget for next year, once we know the allocations specifically for the district, then we would need to take a look and see how they could be best used over a period of time. Using the funds for reoccurring costs will create a funding cliff when the funds are no longer there. So they're going to give you this money, but it's not going to last forever. And historically speaking, it's only one-time funds. So unless they were to provide additional bills and law to support districts and states, you know, this money is going to go away. So we have to be careful on how it's used, or with the understanding that positions hired with these funds would be short-term positions. So included in the first draft of this budget is $2.4 million of stimulus funds. So the question remains of what is going to happen with the rest of it, and what is the allocation, and how is the state aid picture going to either use some of this, or these funds would be on top of additional state aid. And that's what we're waiting for. And it's a really, you know, there's very different answers for very different scenarios.
So we want to pause there. This is really the most updated information we have. Everything else that we present tonight is really a repeat of past discussions. Questions for Cynthia? Any questions or any reactions to this latest information?
Is there like a cutoff time for them to make this decision?
Well, April 1st is the legal deadline for so the budget is already late. It's a matter of how late. Now, it sounds like it could be a couple weeks. I mean, we've seen it go as far as, what, August before? So,
End of August it was.
yeah, so our hope is that it's within the next week or two.
So the budget that we're to adopt on the 19th is including this federal stimulus of the 2.4?
Right.
Okay.
What we are waiting to see is the state going to supplement that or supplant it?
Right.
And that's a big critical difference. So at this point, we feel very confident that a $17,000 deficit is going to be addressed positively through state aid.
Right.
That's why we're not proposing any reductions to programming, any reductions to staffing. We feel pretty good right now as for 21-22. But as Cynthia noted, it's one-time funds, and we need to be careful about how we spread that out and how we utilize that. Cynthia, you had also, when we were talking today, so foundation aid is formula-driven, and the state was supposed to follow the formula to bring every school district up to what the formula was supposed to be, but it's been frozen for several years. If we were to have our foundation aid restored to the formula amount, and we've heard that some of these proposals, or two of the proposals, are trying to do that in 3 years, what's the total dollar amount we are underfunded per the formula for foundation aid?
It's approximately $6.6 million.
So that's a pretty significant, so again, if this does get passed, and over the next 3 years, we're restored $6 million plus, that's a completely different, set of circumstances. On the flip side, and again, I'm reminded that in August, we were talking about a 20% reduction at withhold, and now literally 8 months later, we're talking about historic increases and putting us back to whole, so to speak. So I think Cynthia said it best. It's so wide and ambiguous. We're not comfortable making any formal recommendations tonight regarding, the spending plan yet until we have that information. But on the 19th, Cynthia, which is our budget adoption, we should have a state budget in place, and we should have that information for you. So my recommendation would be that we have another budget workshop on the 19th. And it may only be 20 minutes. We may not need a lot of discussion, but at least we should have that information.
So if that question on the federal stimulus is not settled, the green line on the revenues chart,
Right.
we can't adopt the budget, right?
Well, we'll have to, so.
We might have to have another meeting or something like that, right?
So the state budget is not in place, but we have to adopt our budget. What's our strategy? I know we've had to do this before.
In the past, when we've been faced with this, we've discussed that you're going to have to adopt a budget. And so most likely you'll adopt a budget that would accommodate additional spending based on potentially additional aid, because you need to make sure that you have a large enough voter approved budget that you don't overspend your voter approved budget. The issue is that this year, and in most years, when we're sitting at, right before the state budget comes out, we're talking about probably $200,000 to $500,000 of a difference between the executive proposal and the ending state budget. This year, we're talking about millions of dollars. And so it's really putting districts in a pinch to make these decisions at the last minute. And so we're going to have to strategize what to do. And honestly, it's an unprecedented situation. So if we don't have a budget next week, we'll have to figure that out.
I mean, there's still a month difference between April 19th and May 18th.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like we can't have a special meeting or anything or something of that nature. Or if we could do it conditionally, like you said, that might be reasonable too.
We don't believe we'll need another meeting. We think if the information comes in prior to the 19th.
Oh, yeah.
We're we're ready to finish it.
Yeah.
That's just a big question mark.
Yep, okay, yeah, agree.
They are in negotiations. It is moving along. I read an article before this meeting started that some of the regular bills have moved along. So I think it is in the works, and we're all hopeful that it's resolved next week. Worst case scenario, legally, the board has to adopt the budget by the 23rd of April. So if it really became jammed and it was later than next week, you would have the option of moving the budget adoption a little bit later.
Yeah.
Adopting on Monday, it has to be adopted by that Friday.
Okay, thanks.
Good, thank you for mentioning, so that might help.
Yeah. Let's hope it doesn't happen, it's just a
Well, but for the BOCES, right? Yeah.
scenario.
So this is really, again, this was really the new information we wanted to present, and it's just historic and unique in light of everything that's been going on. So, I guess, what did we expect? So moving on, I just want to finish the rest of the information, the presentation, and then, again, most of this is just a continuation of what we recommended last meeting. One thing I did want to note, and I think this is important, so these positions are budgeted for our next year's school budget. And I know there were some questions regarding, what positions are we filling? Are we filling all positions? So we hired a school counselor this year to help with the COVID concerns and issues, specifically at the high school. We have built that position into this the developing 21-22 budget. So again, just that is in the budget. We had a music teacher position that we went down because of the remote learning model, and we had a resignation, and so we said, well, we're not going to fill it for this year, but we are going to fill it and replace it for next year and beyond. So that position is currently posted. We have an earth science teacher position that is a result of retirement, a general science teacher as a result of a retirement in special ed. Those positions will also be filled. And then we have a Spanish teacher and an art teacher via resignation that we will fill for next year. So all these positions are going to be budgeted for and obviously hired.
So we had some trouble filling a Spanish teacher position in the past, right?
I will say that the last two, based on our applicant pool, now we've posted since about 15 days, we had a total of 0 for both of those positions. So I take that back. We did have one applicant that is finishing up their certification. They're not officially certified yet. So we do have one candidate, but we will continue to promote the openings. This district has not had a problem in the past attracting people.
Right.
It's it's a little early, but we like to try to be early than late. But I don't have any concern that we won't fill those positions.
Yeah.
But
that was more of a skill statement than whether.
So those positions are posted right now?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I know the district doesn't have trouble, I know that, but that skill sometimes was harder to come by.
Well, you may only have one choice.
Right.
Unlike, wanting to have 10 choices, you may only have one. So yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Those are tough. The other item I want to just note is we have budgeted for the summer programs that we had talked about as an intervention. These are for our students, our most at-risk students, knowing the challenges of this past year. We also have these positions posted. These are for our own faculty to fill, and so we do have that budgeted as well. So I just wanted to note those two, instructional positions, and obviously this program, it's in the budget, along with all other current programming and staffing levels. So I think that's important. Nothing else is being looked at to be reduced. And then again, I will go through these quickly because you've seen them, they haven't changed, so forgive me. If there's a question, I'll pause, but for brevity's sake. Again, we will continue to recommend that we follow the board policy regarding allowable fund balance. And Cynthia, that too is one of the items in both budgets could be potentially approved to allow that to increase from potentially 4 to 6 to 8.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
Yep, okay. So that's one way to handle excess revenue, is you can hold on to it for future years versus having to hurry up and try to find a use for it or put it into a reserve that has some limitations. So that would be a very big help. And again, that's just the importance of fund balance, which we've talked about. Again, we are asking our communities for our tax levy limit, which is 1.55, and there is no need to seek anything higher than that. Again, just more of a general statement and philosophy is to make sure that we replenish those reserves. And again, you don't want to make the decision to be fat in reserves and short or lacking on programming. But on the flip side, as we've learned, we want to make sure we have enough money for the next couple of years. Because it sounds great now, but when things happen at the state level, we ultimately pay the price for that, at least from an economic standpoint. So having reserves allows us to kind of get through those rocky times. And again, as I showed at the last meeting, 10 years ago, we were in the same situation, so it can happen, and we just want to be smart. But obviously, we don't want to not provide opportunities for kids. This is probably the biggest lift for us, and this is going to be an ongoing conversation as a board and as a district and as a community, is where do we want to invest? And we're not going to simply invest in everything that we always have. Like we said, there are other areas that we want to address and or need to address. So again, we want to keep this at the forefront. The bus replacement plan, this is one of the propositions. You've seen this, but I had this slide from previous presentations, and we use this in our budget newsletter because it's really important. So we're incentivized to update our fleet, and we receive 78% transportation aid. So every dollar we spend, we receive 78 cents back. And when you do the math, you take a new bus, and after you take out the aid, it's about a $12,000 purchase spread out over 5 years. It's one of the best investments you can make. So again, I know sometimes people will say, why are you always buying new buses? Because it's incentivized and it's a good investment, and it's obviously we want our buses to be safe and well maintained. And then those were just the buses that we are trading in and replacing. So that's it for tonight. Again, we didn't want to belabor it because really we don't have that last piece of information that we need, but what we expect to have it by next meeting. So. Again, I will pause there. If there's any questions from any of you, any questions for Cynthia, Jeff, if there's anything you want to add.
Wait and see here. Hopefully, like you said, we get the budget done and in here next week, so we can really put numbers to paper.
Yeah, we will be in district next week, so if it comes in, we'll be working on those. I know, Cynthia, you don't have to be. Jeff and I will be, so I'm sorry. I don't want to speak for you.
So maybe by next Friday update, we have good news.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, let us know as soon as you find out.
All right, if there's no other questions, we will conclude the budget workshop, and then we can move right into the regular session.
So,